My name is Emma, and I'm 31 years old. I'm about to tell you how my family pushed me to a place I never thought I'd go, and how I finally took my life back. You're not welcome this Christmas until you apologize to Aunt Linda. My mom's words cut through the air in our crowded hallway, sharp and cold. The scent of Thanksgiving leftovers still hung in the air, a sickeningly sweet reminder of the disaster the evening had become. Her arms were crossed, her face set in a mask of disappointment that I knew all too well. It was the face she used when I wasn't being the daughter she expected me to be, the quiet, agreeable, and endlessly generous one. Behind her, my dad shifted his weight from one foot to the other, avoiding my eyes. He muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "She'll cave, she always does." That was it. That was the moment something inside me, something that had been bent for years, finally snapped. They saw me as weak, as a pushover they could count on to smooth things over, no matter how badly I was treated. They saw me as a resource, a guarantee. What they didn't know, what they had conveniently ignored for 6 long years, was that I was the one secretly funding their comfortable lives, their phones, their vacations, their endless stream of online shopping packages. It was all me. And as I stood there, banished from the one family event I still held sacred, I made a decision. This time, I wasn't going to cave. This time, I was going to cut it all off. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you are watching from. It all began with a single phone call, a drop of poison that I willingly drank, not knowing it would slowly contaminate my entire life for the next 6 years. I was 25, and for the first time I felt like I had my feet firmly on the ground. College was a blur of debt, stress, and part-time jobs that paid just enough to cover instant noodles and secondhand textbooks. But now, I had a real salaried position in the marketing department of a mid-sized company. The office was generic, a sea of gray cubicles under fluorescent lights. But to me, it was a palace. It was proof that I had made it. That first paycheck felt like a sacred object. I remember holding it in my hands, staring at my name printed neatly next to a number that was more money than I had ever possessed at one time. I didn't go on a shopping spree. I didn't do anything reckless. I drove to the bank, opened my first ever savings account, and deposited a third of it. I created a budget on a spreadsheet, meticulously allocating funds for rent, utilities, student loan payments, and groceries. I felt a surge of pride so potent it almost made me dizzy. I was independent. I was capable. I was an adult. My dream wasn't grand. It was simply to be self-sufficient, to never have to ask anyone for anything. Growing up, money had always been a source of tension in our house. There was never enough of it, and my parents' hushed, anxious arguments about bills were the soundtrack to my childhood. I promised myself my life would be different. I would be responsible. As my first Christmas with a real income approached, I was filled with a quiet, bubbling excitement. This year, I wouldn't be giving out cheap, handmade gifts that always felt slightly embarrassing next to the store-bought presents from everyone else. I could finally contribute properly. I spent weeks planning. I decided on a beautiful cashmere blend scarf for my mom, a high-end drill bit set for my dad who was always tinkering in the garage, and a signed copy of a book by my brother Mark's favorite author. They were thoughtful gifts, not extravagant, but chosen with care. I wanted to show them I was thinking of them, that my new success was something I wanted to share. The call came on a Tuesday evening, about a week before Christmas. I had just gotten home, kicked off my shoes, and was debating what to make for dinner. When my phone rang and I saw Mom on the screen, I smiled and answered, expecting a normal holiday check-in. "Emma, honey, how are you?" she started, her voice a little too bright. It was her tell. That overly cheerful tone was a warning siren that a request was coming. "I'm good, Mom. Just unwinding after work. How are things?" "Oh, busy," she said, and then her voice dropped. A long theatrical sigh traveled through the phone. "It's just been so difficult with your Aunt Linda. I don't know what she's going to do." I felt an immediate, conditioned pang of sympathy. Aunt Linda, my mom's younger sister, was perpetually in a state of crisis. Her life was a revolving door of lost jobs, bad relationships, and financial emergencies. "What happened?" I asked, already knowing it would be about money. "She lost her job at the department store last month," Mom explained, her voice thick with exaggerated sorrow. "Her unemployment hasn't kicked in yet, and Bill, you know how useless he is, isn't bringing in enough to cover everything. She told me yesterday that she hasn't bought a single Christmas present for the kids." She was crying, Emma, crying. Can you imagine how awful that must feel? To have nothing for your children on Christmas morning? She painted such a vivid picture of misery that the guilt was instantaneous and suffocating. Here I was, feeling proud of my little savings account, while my cousins were facing a giftless Christmas. That's horrible, Mom, I said, my voice soft. Is there anything I can do to help? It was the question she was waiting for, the door I had just unlocked for her. Well, sweetie, I was thinking, she began, her voice shifting from sorrowful to strategic. Your father and I are on a fixed income, you know how it is. And your brother, Mark, is doing his best. But with his own 2 kids, he's stretched so thin. He can't possibly cover it. She let the implication hang in the air. A heavy, unspoken accusation. You're the only one who can. You're the one without a husband or children. You're the one whose money is your own. You've got that wonderful new job, she continued, her voice now syrupy sweet. And you've always been so generous. It would just be for this one Christmas, to help Linda get back on her feet. You'll help, right? For the family? For the family. Those 3 words were her ultimate weapon. To say no would be to declare myself outside of that circle, to brand myself as selfish and uncaring. I looked around my small, undecorated apartment. My carefully planned budget flashed in my mind. Helping Linda wouldn't just mean spending my gift money. It would mean emptying a huge chunk of my new savings account, the one that represented my independence and my future. A small, weak voice inside me screamed, "Say no! It's not your responsibility." But my mother's voice was louder, filled with decades of practiced emotional manipulation. I felt cornered, trapped by my own success. My ability to pay had suddenly become my obligation to pay. I guess I can help a little, I heard myself say, the words feeling like a surrender. The relief in her voice was immediate and palpable. Oh, Emma, thank you. You're a true lifesaver. Linda will be so grateful. I knew we could count on you. The conversation ended moments later. Within 5 minutes, a new text message dinged on my phone. It was from Mom. It wasn't a suggestion for a few toys. It was a detailed list, complete with links to online stores. A brand new PlayStation for my cousin Alex. A pair of $150 sneakers for his brother, Ben. A tablet, and a case for their sister, Chloe. The total was nearly $1,000. My heart sank. This wasn't helping a family in need. This was funding a lifestyle they couldn't afford, ensuring that they wouldn't lose face on Christmas Day. But I had given my word. To back out now would cause a fight, and I was, above all else, a conflict avoider. I spent the next few days in a haze of resentment and anxiety. I transferred the money from savings, watching the balance shrink with a painful lurch. I spent my weekend navigating crowded malls, standing in long lines, buying extravagant gifts for my aunt's children while my own modest gift plans for my parents and brother were abandoned. The scarf, the drill bits, the book, they all went back on the shelf. I couldn't afford them anymore. On Christmas morning, I watched as my cousins tore into the presents with squeals of delight. Aunt Linda hugged my mother tightly, actual tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Carol," she whispered. "You completely saved us. I don't know what I would have done without you." My mom just patted her on the back and smiled. That's what sisters are for. Later, my dad clapped my Uncle Bill on the shoulder. "You did good by your kids this year, Bill," he said with a nod of approval. Not a single person looked my way. My name was never spoken. I was an invisible ghost who had haunted their bank accounts, leaving behind a bounty of gifts before vanishing without a trace. I sat there nursing a cup of coffee, feeling hollowed out. A part of me felt a flicker of pride. I had provided for them. I had been the good daughter, the responsible one. But a much larger part of me felt used. I told myself over and over that it was a one-time thing, an emergency, a good deed that I shouldn't expect any credit for. I was naive to think it would stop there. That Christmas wasn't an exception. It was an audition. I had shown them that I was willing and able to be their financial fallback, and they had taken careful note. The emergencies started coming more frequently. 2 months later, Mark called. "Hey, Em, you won't believe it. The transmission on my car just went out. The mechanic is quoting me $1,500. There's no way I can swing that. Can you help me out? I'll pay you back, I swear." I knew he wouldn't. He never had. But the thought of my brother being unable to get to work, of my nieces being stranded, was enough to make me open my banking app. I sent him the money. Then in the summer, it was my dad's 65th birthday. My mom called me with an idea. "Let's all pitch in and get him that big new gas grill he's been wanting," she said. I thought it was a great idea, a true group effort. But when it came time to pay, the story changed. "Mark can only put in $50, she said, "and your father and I will cover the propane tank. You can get the grill itself, right? It'll be your main gift." The grill cost $700. The propane tank cost $30. I bought the grill. It was a slow, insidious creep. Each request was isolated, presented as a unique and unfortunate circumstance. A leaking roof, a surprise medical bill, a school trip for a cousin. But when strung together, they formed a suffocating chain of obligation. My role in the family had been redefined without my consent. I was no longer just Emma, the daughter or the sister. I was Emma the solution. I was the family's walking, talking emergency fund. And the door to that fund, once opened, proved impossible to close. The first year, I told myself it was an anomaly, a one-off act of familial duty. The second year, with its smattering of emergencies and last-minute needs, I reasoned that this was just a temporary phase, that they would all get back on their feet soon. But by the third year, any illusion I had clung to had completely disintegrated. The exploitation was no longer a series of isolated incidents. It was a system. It was a tradition. I was 28 years old, and my primary role in my own family had become that of a faceless benefactor, an unspoken line item in their annual budget. The shift was subtle at first, then brutally overt. The polite, guilt-laden phone calls from my mother were replaced by something far more efficient and chilling, the Christmas spreadsheet. It would arrive in a group text every year in early November. The text from my mom was always breezy and impersonal. Here we go again. Time to get organized for the holidays. The link would open a shared Google sheet, its columns glowing with festive green and red. I remember the first time I saw it. I was at my desk, trying to finalize a quarterly report, when my phone buzzed. I clicked the link and my stomach immediately tightened. The spreadsheet was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive organization. Column A listed every family member's name except mine. My name was nowhere on the list of recipients. Column B was for the gift idea, filled with links to expensive electronics, designer clothes, and weekend getaway packages. Column C was titled Purchased By. This was the column that haunted me. For the first few days, it would remain mostly blank. Then my brother Mark might tentatively put his name next to a small item, like a book for one of the kids. My parents would assign themselves a mid-range gift for each of their grandchildren. But the big-ticket items, the brand new laptop for my niece starting high school, the top-of-the-line golf clubs for my father, the all-inclusive spa day for Mom and Aunt Linda, always remained unclaimed. They were orphaned items on a list, waiting for their provider. They were waiting for me. No one ever asked me to buy them. No one ever had to. The expectation was silent, heavy, and absolute. If I didn't step in, the spreadsheet would be a testament to my failure. The gifts wouldn't be purchased and Christmas would be less bright. A disappointment that would be silently but pointedly laid at my feet. That third year, I tried to resist. I stared at the list for days, a cold knot of dread in my stomach. The laptop my niece wanted cost nearly $2,000. The golf clubs were another $1,000. I couldn't do it. My own 10-year-old car was making a rattling noise, and I was desperately trying to save for a down payment on a new one. I decided to set a boundary. I called my mom. "Hey, Mom," I started, my voice betraying a nervousness I couldn't conceal. I was looking at the Christmas list. "Oh, great," she said cheerfully. "Some good ideas on there this year, right? Your niece is so excited about that laptop for her schoolwork." "Right. Well, that's what I was calling about," I said, forcing myself to push forward. "Everything is a bit expensive this year. I'm trying to save up for a new car, and I don't think I can contribute as much." The silence on the other end of the line was sharp and cold. Her cheerful tone vanished, replaced by an icy disappointment that was far worse than outright anger. "I see," she said finally. Her voice was clipped. "Well, Emma, no one is forcing you to do anything. You just do what you can. I'm sure your niece will understand that your car is more important than her education. And your father will be fine with his old golf clubs. He's used to making do. We'll all be fine." The guilt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. She had taken my reasonable financial boundary and twisted it into an act of profound selfishness. I was choosing a car over my niece's future. I was letting my father down. In less than 30 seconds, she had dismantled my resolve and left me feeling like a monster. No, that's not what I meant," I backpedaled, hating the weakness in my own voice. "Of course I'll get the laptop for her. And the clubs for Dad. I'll make it work." "Well, that's wonderful, honey," she said, her warmth instantly returning now that I had capitulated. "I knew you'd understand. It's what family does. We make sacrifices for each other." The word "we" was laughable. The sacrifices were entirely one-sided. I ended the call and, with a feeling of grim resignation, opened the spreadsheet and typed my name in the Purchased By column next to the laptop and the golf clubs. I was not a daughter making a loving contribution. I was an employee fulfilling a quota. The most painful part of this new tradition was my complete erasure from the narrative of their happiness. My money was present at every holiday, every birthday, every celebration, but I was not. My generosity was the fuel, but the people driving the car were my parents, my aunt, my brother. They were the ones who got the credit. Social media became a gallery of my own hidden sacrifices. One weekend I saw my brother post a series of photos on Facebook. It was his whole family, him, his wife, their 2 kids, at a beautiful lakefront cabin. They were roasting marshmallows, hiking, and smiling blissfully for the camera. The caption read, "An amazing surprise getaway weekend. My wife is the best for planning this, and huge thanks to Mom and Dad for making it happen. A family first blessed." I felt the air leave my lungs. I had paid for that cabin. I had booked it 2 months prior as a group gift for my sister-in-law's 30th birthday. My mom had called me to coordinate it, which meant she sent me the link to the rental and told me the dates. My contribution, which covered the entire 3-night stay, was recast as a generous gift from my parents. And I hadn't even been invited to come along. I was staring at photos of a family vacation that I had funded, but was not considered a part of. I sank onto my couch, the glow of the phone illuminating the tears welling in my eyes. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the exclusion. It was the clear, unspoken message that my value to them was purely transactional. I was useful, but I was not wanted. They needed my income, but they did not need me. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. When my cousin got into a local college, I was tapped to buy her a new expensive laptop for her classes. A few weeks later, Aunt Linda posted a photo of my cousin holding the laptop box, beaming. So proud of my girl. The caption read, "Ready to take on the world with this amazing graduation gift from her grandparents." Dozens of comments poured in, congratulating my cousin and praising my parents for their generosity. I read through them, feeling a familiar wave of nausea. I existed in the background, a silent, steady resource they could tap at will. The tradition was set in stone. They would live their lives, celebrating their milestones, enjoying their comforts, and I would be the one quietly funding it from the shadows. They took pictures, they made memories, they thanked each other. My name was never mentioned. I wasn't a participant in their lives. I was just the sponsor. And as the years wore on, the loneliness of that role began to eat away at me, leaving a hollow space where my sense of self-worth used to be. Dread is a quiet thing. For me, it arrived on the morning of Thanksgiving, settling in my stomach like a cold stone before my alarm even went off. In the past, I'd felt a complicated mix of obligation and a faint, stubborn hope before these family gatherings. But this year, all the hope had been extinguished, leaving only the grim certainty that the day would demand something from me I no longer had the strength to give. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, entertaining the fantasy of just not going. I could call and say I was sick. The thought was tempting, a brief, shimmering vision of a day spent in peace, on my own terms. But the reality of the aftermath was too daunting. The worried calls would turn into accusatory ones. My absence would be framed as a deliberate slight, another piece of evidence in the case of Emma's selfishness. It was easier to go and endure the slow-drip poison of their company than to deal with the tidal wave of drama my absence would create. So I got up. I showered and dressed in deliberately neutral clothes, a simple sweater and jeans that wouldn't invite comment. I put on my makeup like armor, carefully constructing a pleasant, placid expression I hoped would last the day. I baked the pumpkin pie my mother had assigned to me, boxing it up while it was still warm. As I drove the 40 minutes to my parents' house, I gave myself the usual pre-game pep talk. Don't engage. Be polite. Smile and nod. Just get through the day. The moment I walked through the door, my armor began to crack. The house was already buzzing with a forced, high-pitched energy. My mother took the pie from my hands without a real greeting. "Oh, you made the one with the store-bought crust again," she commented, not unkindly, but with a note of disappointment that was expertly calibrated to make me feel inadequate. "I'll put it on the counter." In the living room, my brother Mark barely looked up from the football game on TV. "Hey, Em, traffic bad?" he asked, his attention already back on the screen. He was a master of making me feel like an interruption. And then there was Aunt Linda. She was the queen of the room, perched on the arm of the sofa, holding court with a few other relatives. She was recounting a story, her hands gesturing wildly to emphasize her points. On her wrist, a new gold bracelet, a birthday gift from last month from me, glinted under the lights. My arrival barely registered as a blip in her performance. The day wore on in a series of small, familiar slights. My uncle asked me about my job and then cut me off mid-sentence to tell a story about his own brief, failed attempt at a corporate career. My sister-in-law complimented my sweater, then added, "It's amazing what you can find at those outlet malls." It wasn't a compliment. It was a subtle jab at my perceived social standing. I was the one with the money, yet they treated me as if I had no class. The breaking point arrived, as I knew it would, in the form of my aunt. After dinner, as a few of us were lingering in the kitchen, Linda swept in. She placed her handbag on the granite island with a proprietary thud. It wasn't just any bag. It was a high-end designer purse, a buttery leather status symbol that had cost me over $600. It had been her big birthday present, procured after weeks of my mother telling me how much Linda deserved something truly special to lift her spirits. "Bill is just too good to me," Linda announced to no one in particular, though her eyes scanned the room to make sure she had an audience. She ran a hand over the leather, a look of pure adoration on her face. I was so shocked when he gave it to me. I mean, where did he even find the money? He must have been saving for months. He's just the most thoughtful husband in the world. My Uncle Bill, who was leaning against the doorway, puffed out his chest and grinned, accepting the praise as his due. The lie was so audacious, so completely shameless, that I felt a hot flush of anger creep up my neck. I had worked overtime for 2 weeks to pay for that bag without dipping into my savings. And here they were, using my hard work as a prop in the play of their happy, successful marriage. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the wine I'd been sipping, or maybe it was the culmination of 1,000 other invisible sacrifices. I turned to Linda, my voice much quieter than the rage I felt inside. "The bag is beautiful, Linda," I said, my words precise and level. "I'm glad you like it." For a moment there was confusion on her face. Then, a flicker of dawning recognition, quickly followed by the calculated mask of outrage. Her eyes widened, and her lower lip began to tremble. She looked at me as if I had just confessed to a murder. What are you trying to imply, Emma?" she stammered, her voice rising with theatrical hurt. She took a step back, clutching the bag to her chest as if protecting it from me. "I'm not implying anything," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I just said I was glad you liked it. You're trying to embarrass me," she suddenly shrieked, tears instantly flooding her eyes. "You're trying to make my husband look bad. You've always been jealous of me, always." She turned and fled the kitchen, her sobs echoing down the hallway. The room fell into a mortifying silence. My Uncle Bill's face was dark with anger. Mark just shook his head, looking at me with undisguised disgust. Then my mother was there, her presence a cold fury at my side. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and pulled me toward the pantry. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "I didn't do anything," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "I just said one thing. Mom, you know I paid for that bag. You asked me to." Her eyes were like chips of ice. "It doesn't matter who paid for it," she seethed. "What matters is that you deliberately humiliated your aunt. You know how sensitive she is. You know what she's been through. And you had to make it all about you, didn't you? You couldn't just let her have one nice moment. The injustice was so profound it stole my breath. Make it about me? Mom, I make nothing about me. Everything I do is for this family, and none of you even see it." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she sneered. "You think throwing money at people is a substitute for being a kind person. It's not. You are a cold, bitter girl, and I am ashamed of your behavior. You will go find Linda, and you will give her a sincere, heartfelt apology right now." I stared at her, at the stranger wearing my mother's face. Apologize. She wanted me to apologize for being exposed. She wanted me to validate their lies and take the blame for their discomfort. A strange, chilling calm settled over me. The fight went out of me, replaced by a certainty so absolute it was almost peaceful. I was done. "No," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. "I'm not apologizing. I didn't do anything wrong." I pulled my arm from her grasp, walked out of the pantry, past the staring, judgmental eyes of my family, and grabbed my coat. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I got in my car and drove away, the tears finally coming hot and furious. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. An hour later, sitting in the darkness of my own quiet apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Her final judgment. "Your father and I are deeply disappointed. You ruined Thanksgiving. Until you are ready to apologize to Linda, you are not welcome in this house. That includes Christmas." I read the words and I didn't feel the sting of punishment. I felt the click of a lock, the final, definitive sound of a door closing. They thought they were banishing me. They had no idea they had just handed me the key to my own cage. The night after Thanksgiving was one of the longest of my life. Sleep was an impossibility. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of peace and quiet, felt like a pressure cooker. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, her expression contorted with a rage and disappointment that felt utterly foreign. Her words echoed in the silence, bouncing off the walls of my mind. Cold, bitter, jealous. "You always have to make it about you." Was that who I was? For 6 years, I had defined myself by my generosity, by my willingness to be the family's silent support system. I had sacrificed my own financial security, my own dreams, all in the name of being a good daughter. Now that identity had been violently stripped away, and I was left with my mother's cruel caricature. I paced the floor of my living room, from the window to the kitchen and back again, a frantic energy thrumming through my veins. The banishment from Christmas wasn't the core of the pain. It was the accusation behind it. It was the complete invalidation of everything I had ever done for them. Sometime around 3 a.m., exhaustion and anger gave way to a desperate, urgent need for proof. I felt a sudden, burning desire to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the villain of this story. My feelings of being used and erased were not the product of a bitter, jealous mind. They were a rational response to years of quantifiable exploitation. I needed evidence. I needed the cold, hard, indisputable facts. With a new and chilling sense of purpose, I walked into my home office, sat down in the dark, and powered on my laptop. The screen's glow cast long shadows on the wall, and I felt like an investigator about to uncover the details of a long-running crime, my own. I started with my credit card accounts. I logged in and began the painstaking process of downloading 6 years' worth of monthly statements. The PDFs piled up in a folder on my desktop, a digital mountain of my financial history. I opened the first one from November 6 years ago. I scrolled through the line items, and the memories, sharp and painful, came flooding back. There it was. Best Buy, $989.90 Ning. That was the PlayStation and the tablet for Aunt Linda's kids, the transaction that had started it all. I remembered the feeling of my stomach dropping as I handed over my new credit card, the one I had promised myself I would only use for real emergencies. I opened another statement, this one from 3 years ago. Royal Caribbean Cruises, $500. The deposit for the vacation my mom and aunt took. I remembered the phone call vividly. We just need a little help with the initial deposit to hold the room, Emma, my mom had said. We'll pay you back as soon as we can. They never did. Instead, I got a postcard of a sunset and a mountain of their vacation photos on Facebook. The dig became an obsession. I worked backward through the years, a financial archaeologist unearthing the fossil record of their dependency. Each transaction was a story. Home Depot, $749.50. That was the top-of-the-line gas grill for my dad's birthday, the one he now bragged about as if he'd bought it himself. Zales Jewelers, $625. The gold bracelet for Aunt Linda that she was wearing tonight. Amazon, $450. The noise-canceling headphones and other assorted gifts for my brother's family, the ones my parents took credit for. After I finished with the credit cards, I moved on to my bank account. I filtered my transfer history, searching for my brother's name. The list that populated the screen was staggering. It scrolled on, a waterfall of my money pouring into his account. $200 car payment, $350 rent help, $150 late utility bill. The descriptions were his, typed into the memo line of the app. Seeing them all together, I felt a fresh wave of anger. He had treated me like a bottomless, no-interest line of credit, a financial institution with the familial obligation to say yes. He hadn't asked for a loan in years. He just sent a request with a description of his latest crisis, and I, dutifully, had always approved it. The final, most insidious layer was the recurring payments, the small, automatic withdrawals I had long forgotten about. I was still the primary account holder on our family cell phone plan. For years, I had been covering the overages on my brother's line and the international calling package my mother used to talk to a distant cousin. I was paying for the family's shared streaming subscriptions, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, all linked to my credit card. My Amazon Prime account, the one my dad used constantly to order tools and gadgets with 2-day shipping, was being billed to me every month. These weren't grand gestures. They were tiny, parasitic attachments, draining my resources so consistently that I had stopped even noticing them. They had woven my finances into the very fabric of their daily comfort and convenience. With the first hint of gray dawn breaking outside my window, I opened a new blank spreadsheet. I created the columns: date, recipient, item, and reason, and cost. Then, with a robotic and methodical focus, I began to populate it. I transcribed every transaction, every transfer, every monthly fee. The list grew longer and longer, a horrifyingly detailed ledger of my own erasure. Filling it out felt like writing a confession. I was confessing to years of self-neglect, of prioritizing their wants over my own needs, of valuing their comfort above my own future. After what felt like an eternity, I was finished. Every expense was documented. I scrolled to the bottom of the cost column, the number of entries running into the hundreds. My hand trembled slightly as I moved the cursor to the next empty cell. I typed in the formula, sum D2, D437. I took a deep breath and pressed the enter key. The number that flashed onto the screen seemed to burn itself into my retinas. 52,481. Didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just stared, a profound and chilling silence filling the room. The number was more than just money. It was validation. It was the concrete, undeniable proof that I was not the bitter, jealous, crazy one. My pain was real. My resentment was earned. This number was the price of my silence, the cost of being the good daughter. I leaned back in my chair, the exhaustion of the sleepless night hitting me all at once. But underneath the fatigue, a new feeling was taking root. The rage had burned away, leaving behind the cold, hard steel of resolve. The spreadsheet wasn't a tragedy. It was a weapon. It was an invoice. They thought they held all the power, wielding their approval and affection like a currency they could grant or withhold at will. They thought banning me from Christmas was their ultimate move, their checkmate. But they were wrong. The person who controls the money controls everything. For 6 years I had been the source of their power, the invisible engine running their comfortable lives, and I was about to pull the plug. The morning after I created the spreadsheet was the first morning in years that I woke up feeling truly rested. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a landscape of crystalline clarity. The sun streamed through my window, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an intrusion signaling the start of another day of obligations. It felt like a spotlight on a new path. My decision was made. There would be no dramatic confrontations, no screaming matches. My revenge wouldn't be a fiery explosion. It would be a quiet, systematic demolition. I was going to dismantle the financial scaffolding that held their lives together, one silent click at a time. I made myself a pot of strong black coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. The spreadsheet was still on the screen, a monument to my past foolishness and a blueprint for my future liberation. My work was not emotional now. It was administrative. I was simply closing a series of accounts that should have been closed long ago. I started with the small things, the tiny parasitic drains on my income that they took for granted. I logged into my Netflix account. Under the settings, I found the Manage Profiles section. There they were, Mom and Dad, Mark's fam, and Linda's place. For years, I had pictured them in their separate homes. Scrolling through the interface I paid for, watching movies and shows on my dime, I thought about my mother's favorite British baking show, my brother's obsession with action movies. A faint vestigial pang of guilt tried to surface, but I smothered it with the memory of my mother's face on Thanksgiving. I clicked on each profile and selected the option, Delete Profile. The system asked for confirmation. I clicked yes 3 times without hesitation. Then I went to my account settings and canceled the premium subscription, effective immediately. One down, next was Hulu, then HBO Max, then the family music streaming plan. On the music app I could see what they were listening to. Mark had created a workout mix. My mom had a playlist of soft rock from the 70s. For a moment, it felt uncomfortably intimate, like I was spying on them. But then I realized I wasn't just a spy. I was the unwilling host of the party. It was time to shut it down. I navigated to the family plan settings and, one by one, removed their email addresses from the list of authorized users. An automatic email would be sent to them, I knew, informing them they were no longer part of the plan. I pictured my brother on his commute, his workout playlist suddenly silenced. The image brought a small, cold smile to my face. The next target was more significant, my Amazon Prime account. This was the central hub of their convenient lifestyle. I logged in and looked at the order history, and it was a detailed diary of their entitlement. There were my dad's recent purchases, delivered directly to his address, a new set of gardening shears, a box of expensive car wax, a replacement filter for the coffee machine. There were upcoming subscribe and save orders for my mom's preferred brand of face cream and the water filters for their refrigerator. They didn't even bother to hide it. My account was their account. This felt bigger than canceling a streaming service. This would impact their daily lives. For a second I faltered. Was this too cruel? The image of my father, happily ordering a new gadget with the free 2-day shipping he thought was his right, gave me pause. But then I remembered his words, muttered just loud enough for me to hear. She'll cave. She always does. My resolve hardened like steel. He saw me as weak as a guarantee. It was time to show him how wrong he was. I went to the Prime membership page, my cursor hovering over the End Membership and Benefits link. The website practically begged me not to leave, showing me all the benefits I'd be giving up. But they weren't my benefits. I was paying for a service I barely used, all for their convenience. I clicked the link. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to end your membership? I thought of the 52,481.17 on my spreadsheet. Yes, I whispered to the empty room, and I clicked the final button. The biggest task, the one I had been saving for last, was the cell phone plan. This was the nuclear option. This wasn't about convenience. It was a utility. Years ago, to save everyone money, I had consolidated all our lines onto one family plan under my name, as I had the best credit score. It was my account, my responsibility. Over the years, I had absorbed the cost of my brother's data overages, and my mother's endless calls without complaint. I took a deep breath and dialed the customer service number. After navigating an infuriating labyrinth of automated menus, I was finally connected to a human. A cheerful young man named Kevin answered. "Hi, Kevin," I said, my voice steady and professional. "I'd like to make some changes to my family plan." I gave him my account information. "Of course, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I need to remove 3 lines from my account," I said. "I will be keeping my own line, but the other 3 need to be disconnected from my plan." There was a pause and the sound of typing. "Okay, I can certainly help with that," Kevin said. "So just to confirm, you are requesting to remove the lines ending in 555-2468, belonging to Carol, 555-8765, belonging to David, and 555-3321, belonging to Mark?" Hearing him say their names out loud made it irrevocably real. These weren't just numbers on a bill. They were my parents and my brother. I was cutting a fundamental chord of modern life. "Yes, that is correct," I said, my voice unwavering. "All right," he said. "Those lines will be deactivated from your account at the end of the current billing cycle. The account holders will be notified and will need to set up their own plans with us or another carrier if they wish to keep their numbers. Thank you." "Kevin, that's all I need." I hung up the phone and a profound sense of finality washed over me. I had done it. They would soon discover that their phones, their portals to the world, were no longer my responsibility. They would have to apply for their own plans, pass their own credit checks, and pay their own bills. It was a huge, irreversible step in dismantling their dependence. There was one last piece of business. Before the Thanksgiving disaster, I had, of course, already started my Christmas shopping. The new $2,000 laptop for my niece was sitting in my online shopping cart, waiting for me to click Purchase. I had also ordered a few other gifts, including a new smartwatch for Mark. I navigated to my order history. I found the smartwatch and clicked Cancel Order. A prompt asked for a reason. I selected No Longer Needed. Then I went to the shopping cart and deleted the laptop. A pang of genuine sadness hit me as I did it. My niece was a sweet kid. She was the only truly innocent party in all of this. But I knew, with a heavy heart, that I could not continue to be the family's Santa Claus. To protect myself, the entire operation had to be shut down. Collateral damage was unavoidable. When I was finished, I sat back in my chair. The whole process had taken less than 2 hours. 2 hours to undo 6 years of systemic exploitation. I opened my banking app and looked at my list of upcoming automatic payments. It was beautifully, blissfully short. A great weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying until it was gone. The quiet in my apartment felt different now. It wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. The storm was coming, I knew. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt ready for it. I was in control. The weeks between my quiet revenge and Christmas passed in a strange, surreal silence. I had braced myself for an immediate onslaught of confused texts and angry phone calls, but my phone remained quiet. The silence was unnerving at first, then revealing. It told me just how little they paid attention. They were so accustomed to the seamless comfort of their lives that they didn't notice the support systems being dismantled. The cancellation of a streaming service here, an Amazon Prime membership there. These were minor inconveniences that likely hadn't registered yet, or were dismissed as temporary glitches. They were living in blissful ignorance, secure in the belief that they had punished me with their banishment. They had no idea that their punishment was my liberation, and that the real consequences were still to come. I spent those weeks building a new life for myself in the quiet space I had cleared. I went to work, came home, and reveled in the glorious solitude. I took the money that would have been spent on their Christmas presents and paid off a huge chunk of my credit card debt. I bought a small, elegant Christmas tree for my own apartment and decorated it with silver and blue ornaments, colors my mother had always disliked. I bought myself one perfect gift, a beautiful, high-quality winter coat I had wanted for years but had never felt justified in buying. Wrapping it and placing it under my own tree felt like a revolutionary act of self-care. It was a quiet Christmas, a lonely one at times, but it was mine. The storm finally broke on Christmas morning. I woke up not to an alarm, but to the gentle morning light. I made myself a cup of coffee, put on some soft music, and sat on the couch admiring my little tree. It was peaceful. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up. It was a text from my niece, Chloe. Merry Christmas, Aunt Emma. I hope you have a great day. Just a quick question. Mom said you were getting me a new laptop? I got an email from the store saying the order was canceled. Is everything okay? My heart ached for her. She was a good kid, caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't even know was being fought. I took a moment to compose a reply that was both honest and gentle. Merry Christmas, sweetie. I hope you have a wonderful day too. I'm so sorry about the laptop. Things are a little different this year. You should talk to your parents about it. I love you. I put the phone down, a knot of sadness in my stomach. This was the hardest part, the innocent bystander who would be hurt. But before I could dwell on it for too long, the phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother, Mark. His text was a single, frantic line. WTF, Emma? My phone is dead. Says the line has been deactivated. I'm using the neighbor's Wi-Fi. What did you do? The tone was no longer confused. It was accusatory. The first real shot had been fired. I stared at the message, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I didn't reply. Minutes later, another text came through. It was my mom. Emma, I'm trying to put on a Christmas movie for the kids and Netflix isn't working. It says our account is on hold. Is something wrong with your credit card? Please call me. They were still in the dark. They saw these as separate, unrelated problems, technical glitches that I needed to fix. Their universe was still centered on the assumption that I was their designated problem solver. The idea that these were deliberate, calculated actions had not yet entered their minds. I let her message sit there, unanswered, next to my brother's. I spent the next hour in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I opened my single present, the beautiful coat. I tried it on. It fit perfectly. As I was admiring it in the mirror, my phone began to vibrate violently on the table. A long, angry buzz. It was a group text, and the sender was my dad. Emma, answer your phone. We are all here for Christmas, and none of the big gifts are under the tree. I just checked my Amazon account, and it says every single order for the last month has been canceled. Linda is here with the kids, and they have nothing to open. She's in tears. Mark's phone is shut off. Your mother can't get the TV to work. What in God's name is going on? This was it. The moment of ignition. All the separate threads had been pulled together, and they were finally seeing the pattern. The confusion had curdled into pure rage. They were standing in the wreckage of their Christmas, surrounded by crying children and empty boxes, and they were looking for someone to blame. I sat on my couch, my phone feeling heavy in my hand. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I could have listed my grievances. I could have brought up the years of thankless giving, the Thanksgiving humiliation, the banishment. I could have started a war, but I knew it would be pointless. They would argue, they would deflect, they would twist my words and paint me as the villain no matter what I said. A long, drawn-out fight would only give them satisfaction. So I chose a different path. I decided to give them a single sentence, a quiet, simple truth that would force them to look inward instead of outward. I typed it out slowly, deliberately. Ask yourselves who's really been paying for them. I hit send. And then, for the first time all morning, I felt a sense of calm. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted for exactly 67 seconds. Then my phone erupted. It was a call from my mother. I ignored it. It immediately rang again. A call from my dad. I ignored it. Mark, ignored. Aunt Linda, ignored. The calls came one after another, a frantic, desperate barrage. When they realized I wasn't going to answer, the texts started again, a torrent of fury, confusion, and blame. I didn't read them. I stood up, walked over to my phone, and switched it to silent mode. The screen continued to light up with their names, but the angry buzzing had stopped. I went back to the couch and took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee. I could picture the scene at my parents' house as clearly as if I were there. The bewilderment turning to rage, the frantic, hushed conversations, the dawning, horrifying realization that the magic of their Christmas, the endless bounty they took for granted, wasn't magic at all. It wasn't provided by Santa Claus or born of their own hard work. It was funded entirely by the daughter they had banished, and I had just made it all disappear. Staring at my own small, perfect tree, surrounded by a quiet I had chosen for myself, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was the loneliest Christmas of my life, and it was, without a doubt, the very best one. Christmas evening descended with a quiet, somber grace. Outside my window, the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. The frantic calls and texts had finally ceased, leaving behind a heavy, ringing silence. The initial explosion of their rage had burned out, and now I knew they were in the next phase, deliberation. They were gathered together in my parents' living room, amidst the ruins of their perfect holiday, and they were building their new narrative. I knew my family. I knew how they operated. They would not be reflecting on their own behavior. They would not be acknowledging the truth in my single, pointed text message. They would be doing what they always did, twisting the story to fit their needs. They would paint me as the villain. I would be the unstable, vindictive daughter who, in a fit of jealous rage, had maliciously ruined Christmas. They would tell this story to other family members, to their friends, and eventually to themselves, until it became their truth. My quiet, calculated act of self-preservation would be recast as a psychotic breakdown. The thought of them seizing control of the narrative, of them erasing the real truth just as they had erased my contributions for years, was unbearable. Cutting them off financially was only the first step. To truly be free, I had to disarm them. I had to take away their ability to lie. I needed to present the evidence so clearly, so publicly within our family, that there would be no room for their fiction to take root. I had the truth on my side, documented in cold, hard numbers on a spreadsheet. It was time to publish it. The decision felt momentous, a step from which there would be no return. Was it going too far? A part of me, the old conflict-avoidant Emma, screamed that it was. This was a private family matter. But another, stronger part of me knew that the rules of privacy had been broken long ago, the moment they decided my bank account was a public utility. They had made my finances their business. Now, I would make my finances theirs, in a way they never expected. This wasn't about shaming them for the sake of cruelty. It was about creating a record. It was about ensuring that the truth, for once, would be undeniable. With a resolve that felt as calm and steady as a frozen river, I went to my laptop. I opened the spreadsheet file, my $52,000 monument to their greed. I couldn't just post the raw file. It needed to be presented as irrefutable evidence. I spent the next hour meticulously preparing my case. I took a series of clean, clear screenshots of the spreadsheet. I broke it down by year, creating 6 separate images that showed the relentless, escalating pattern of their demands. I highlighted the grand totals for each year in red. I made sure the columns, date, recipient, item, reason, cost, were perfectly legible. I wanted them to see not just the total, but the humiliating specifics, the spa days for Aunt Linda, the endless loans to Mark, the cruise deposit for my mother, the golf clubs for my father. Then, I created a 7th image, a summary page. I listed each major recurring expense category and its total: gifts, Christmas, birthday, loans, unpaid, utilities, phone streaming, and vacations, luxuries. At the very bottom, in a large, bold font, I put the grand total, $52,481.17. The process was clinical, detached. I felt like an auditor preparing a report on a fraudulent company. As I saved the final image to my desktop, I felt no anger, no glee. I felt only a profound sense of necessity. This was the only way to end the cycle of lies for good. My final act of preparation was to open the family group chat on my phone. The chat was called Family Fun. The irony was almost too much to bear. The last messages from before Thanksgiving were a flurry of cheerful plans about who was bringing what dish for Christmas dinner. It was a digital artifact of a life that was a complete lie. My heart began to pound, a physical reaction to the gravity of what I was about to do. This was the point of no return. I took a deep, steadying breath. I selected the 7 images from my photo library. One by one, I uploaded them into the chat. They appeared in quick succession, a silent, damning flood of data. There were no words, no accusations, just the cold, black and white proof of their 6-year-long exploitation. The chat log, once filled with emojis and exclamation points, now looked like a financial audit. After the last image was loaded, a preview of the summary page glowing on my screen, I typed one final message. My caption, my closing statement, Merry Christmas, Santa doesn't live here anymore. My finger hovered over the send button for a fraction of a second. Then I pressed it. The message appeared instantly, stark and final, beneath the mountain of evidence. I did not wait for a reply. I immediately put my phone down on the table, screen facing down. I stood up and walked into my kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a profound, irreversible act of liberation. I had detonated a truth bomb in the center of their fabricated world. For a long time, the silence in my apartment was matched by the silence on my phone. There were no immediate, frantic replies, no angry calls. I could feel them miles away, gathered around a single phone screen. I pictured their faces, illuminated by the glow of my spreadsheet. The shock, the denial, the dawning, sickening horror of public exposure. There was no defense against this. There were no arguments they could make. I had not presented opinions or feelings. I had presented their own history, paid for by me in the form of a receipt. The silence was their confession. It was the sound of their lies being suffocated by the sheer, overwhelming weight of the truth. And in that quiet, I felt a somber, powerful sense of closure. Whatever happened next, the dynamic had been shattered forever. The foundation of their family, built on my invisible money and my silent compliance, had just been reduced to rubble. The day after Christmas was a strange, hollowed-out day. The profound silence from my family held for most of the morning, a testament to the shockwave I had sent through their lives. I imagined them in a state of suspended animation, unable to process the sheer volume of the evidence I had laid bare. But I knew it wouldn't last. The shock would inevitably give way to damage control, to anger, to a desperate attempt to reclaim their narrative. The first crack in the silence came around noon. It wasn't a text, but a voicemail. The notification popped up, showing it was from my Uncle Bill. I felt a surge of anxiety but forced myself to listen, knowing I had to face the fallout. His voice was thick with rage, a sputtering, incoherent tirade. "You little... How dare you?" he bellowed, his voice cracking with fury. "To embarrass your family like that. After everything we've done for you, taken you in. You're a sick, twisted, ungrateful brat. You think you're so high and mighty with your money? You're nothing. You've destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." I listened to the message, and to my own surprise, I felt almost nothing. There was no sting, no hurt. His anger was the predictable roar of a man whose comfortable life, subsidized by a niece he disdained, had just been exposed. He wasn't angry because I was wrong. He was angry because I was right, and because I had the receipts to prove it. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. The next message was from my father. It wasn't a voicemail. It was a long, rambling text message, a masterclass in guilt and manipulation. "Emma, I don't even know what to say. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since last night. You have absolutely devastated her. How could you be so cruel? We have always been so proud of you, and this is how you repay us? By airing our private business and trying to make us look like monsters? Family is supposed to support each other, not attack each other. I am just so disappointed in the person you've become." I read his words, and all I felt was a profound sense of pity. He didn't even see the irony. Family is supposed to support each other. That's all I had done, to the tune of $52,000. But in his mind, support was a one-way street that flowed directly from my bank account to his. My act of telling the truth was, to him, a greater sin than their years of exploitation. I deleted his text, too. Then came the message from Aunt Linda. It was a series of texts, each one more melodramatic than the last. She never mentioned the money, not once. Her grievance was purely emotional, a performance of profound victimhood. "I can't believe you would do this to me, Emma, to us. I have always loved you like you were my own daughter. You have broken my heart into a million pieces. I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again. This betrayal is the cruelest thing anyone has ever done to me." I read her words and almost laughed. It was perfect. She was so deep in her own narrative of suffering that she couldn't see the reality of the situation. She was the victim. I, the person who had funded her lifestyle for 6 years, was her abuser. It was a stunning display of narcissistic deflection. I blocked her number. I spent the rest of the afternoon fielding these predictable attacks. My brother sent a short, sharp text. "You're dead to me." I thought, "I've been dead to you for years. You've just been cashing the checks of a ghost." By evening, I was emotionally exhausted, but also strangely numb. Their reactions were just noise, the death rattles of a dysfunctional system I had finally escaped. I had expected to feel worse, but instead I just felt empty. The validation I had hoped for hadn't come. And then, something unexpected happened. A notification popped up from a number I didn't recognize. It was a text. "Is this Emma? This is your cousin, Sophie." Sophie was Aunt Linda's oldest child, a quiet, observant girl who was now 20 years old and in college. I hadn't spoken to her directly in years. My heart skipped a beat. I braced myself for another attack. I saw the group chat. Her text continued. I'm just so shocked. I'm sitting here with Chloe. We're so sorry, Emma." I stared at the words, reading them over and over. "We're so sorry." Another text from her came through. "That laptop I got for high school graduation, the one that Grandpa gave me." "That was you, wasn't it? The one on the spreadsheet for $1,500? My fingers trembled as I typed back a single word. "Yes, we never knew," she wrote. "They always told us the gifts were from them. They told us you were just busy with your career, that you weren't really the family type. We just thought you were distant. We had no idea. Thank you for everything. What they did to you was not okay." Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and sudden. This was it. This was the one thing I hadn't even known I was looking for. Not an apology from the guilty, but an acknowledgement from the innocent. One person who saw the truth and wasn't afraid to say it. A few minutes later, Sophie asked if she could call. I agreed. Her voice was hesitant, full of a shame that didn't belong to her. "We're at our dad's apartment," she said quietly. "Mom is at Grandma's and they're all just yelling about you. It's ugly. We didn't want to be there. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We're sorry," she insisted. "Emma, did you really pay for our braces too?" "Yes," I said softly. There was a pause, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered. My mom always told me it came from their dental insurance. I had no idea. We talked for almost an hour. She and Chloe told me things I never knew, confirming the narrative of lies and manipulation from their side. It was a quiet, sad, and incredibly healing conversation. For the first time, I wasn't alone in my reality. When we hung up, I felt a sense of peace settle over me that was more profound than anything I had felt before. The rage from my uncle, the guilt from my father, the victimhood from my aunt, it all faded into the background. It was just noise. But the quiet, heartfelt thank you from my cousin was a signal that had cut through it all. My old family, the one I had tried so desperately to buy the love of, was gone. But in the wreckage, something new and honest had just begun to grow. I hadn't just exposed a toxic system. I had connected with the only part of my family that was worth saving. And that was a victory greater than the $52,000. A year has passed. It's Christmas again, but this year everything is different. My apartment is filled with the warm, inviting scent of mulled wine and fresh pine. Soft music is playing, and the sound of laughter echoes from my small living room. My little silver and blue tree is twinkling in the corner, surrounded by a modest but meaningful pile of gifts. There are no screaming matches, no passive-aggressive comments, no tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. My parents, my brother, and my aunt are not here. After the exposure, there were a few clumsy, half-hearted attempts at what they called reconciliation, which were really just poorly disguised attempts to see if the Bank of Emma was willing to reopen. I met my parents for coffee once. They talked about forgiveness and moving on, but when they couldn't look me in the eye and admit what they had done, I knew nothing had changed. I wished them well, paid for their coffee, and walked away for the last time. My guests tonight are my chosen family. A few close friends from work, my neighbor from down the hall, and most importantly, my cousins, Sophie and Chloe. After that first phone call, we started talking, slowly at first, and then all the time. We rebuilt a relationship outside the toxic shadow of our parents, based on honesty and mutual respect. They are the true gift that came out of all that pain. As I look around the room, I feel a sense of peace that is deep and unshakable. The past year was hard, but it was also the most transformative year of my life. I finally bought a new reliable car. My savings account is growing faster than I ever thought possible. But the real wealth isn't in my bank account. It's in this room. It's in the feeling of being seen and valued for who I am, not for what I can provide. I finally understand that I didn't lose a family. I escaped a hostage situation where I was both the hostage and the ransom. This Christmas, I gave myself the only gift that ever really mattered: peace. I bought my own freedom. If you've ever been the family ATM, if my story sounds anything like yours, know that you're not alone. Hit like, comment with your story, and subscribe for more.